Two-Face, Drilling Through Discovery. Excerpt read by the author. I'm not who you think I am. Captain Marvel, 2019. Chapter 2. Not one Bermuda data triangle, but 3. On September 11, 2018, it was deemed necessary that another investigation would complete the timeline using alternative software. My work on the timeline ceased at this point. Investigative Analyst Gillian Ganley's report. Discovery Documents, page 1464. Just as we begin drilling through the timeline, 3 Bermuda timeline triangles emerge almost immediately. They pop up like a trio of pyramids in a sandy desert of evidence, a desert that feels more like a series of sterile sand dunes than meaningful sets of data. Curiously, all 3 Bermuda timeline triangles appear at 3 critical junctures in the timeline of the Watts family murders. The first Bermuda timeline triangle occurs on Sunday night, August 12, 2018, from 1809 to 2020, and is exactly 131 minutes in duration. The second Bermuda timeline triangle is exactly 111 minutes long and occurs between 21:28 and 23:19. The third is less significant but worth noting all the same. It occurs in the afternoon after the dumping of the 3 bodies on the 13th and spans the 38 minutes following Watts' arrival at his residence. Officer Coonrod gaining entry to the Watts home at 14:19 and his subsequent entry to the neighbour's home sometime prior to 14:45. A Bermuda time triangle is a rocket science-ism that refers to verified technical data as well as the absence of that data. In other words, the triangle somehow doesn't make much sense. It's inconsistent in terms of itself. It has 3 measurable sides, but the sides don't fit together. The dimensions of the data don't match. It's fuzzy. It's a Bermuda triangle because it seems to be there and not there at the same time. Does that make sense? Like the Bermuda Triangle in the Western Atlantic, also known as Hurricane Alley and the Devil's Triangle, off the coasts of southern Florida, Bermuda and Puerto Rico, most anomalies and disappearances can be explained not because of paranormal activity, aliens or ghost ships, but because of human activity, human error, human embellishments, and ordinary inaccuracies. Reporting errors are one thing. Investigations are supposed to be professional and precise documents. With the FBI, CBI, various analysts, detectives and law enforcement involved, one would expect a high degree of comprehensive accuracy in the discovery documents. Is that what we do find? One would imagine the data within the 1,960 pages of discovery documents as well as the 3 terabyte audio-video dump would definitively address all issues, each and every one in this case, wouldn't we? So are all issues definitively addressed and dealt with? The short answer is no. The longer answer is this entire narrative. Instead of clear solutions, what we see in the discovery documents, and what I'm about to show you, is that serious inconsistencies are revealed from the get-go as soon as we begin to scratch the surface. In Two Pollyannas and Rape of Cassandra, we navigated the process of fathoming known unknowns from unknown unknowns. In this narrative, we want to draw crime scene tape around as many known unknowns as we can possibly find, and see how many unknown unknowns can be shifted out of the true crime ether to reveal themselves. Shadows in the dark can't be seen, but at least we know they're there and where the movement is. But how does one find anything in a true crime Bermuda Triangle? Actually, it's not that hard. Despite the strange reality shifts in those 1,960 pages, there is a way to see through the fog that clouds certain areas of the discovery. For example, when the time triangles from several sources are laid over one another and cross-referenced with the discovery documents and the audio-video files, not only are the anomalies exposed, but new data comes to the fore. Let's start this process by examining 3 Bermuda timeline triangles one at a time.
Worth playing for?
Yeah.
Yes.
Number 1. The 131-minute Bermuda timeline triangle. The first triangle ends with Shanann texting Watts on August 12th at 20:20. Sorry I bothered you. I just wanted to talk to you. Shanann's 9-minute call on Sunday night is bothering him. Normally he's a go-with-the-flow guy, especially with Shanann, but not on this night, and especially not now. With both children already dead, there's serious work to be done and serious preparation to put in place before his next victim, the woman he's talking to, arrives home in his lair. The mysterious data missing from the timeline occurs around half an hour previously, when Shanann asks Watts at 1946 to send pictures of the kids in bed. Watts does something peculiar. He resends images from earlier in the day. Discovery Documents, page 2118, of the kids at the dinner table. Then he adds another image from the birthday party, the last image of Bella taken while she was alive by the person who would steal that life from her. Watts doesn't send any images of the children in bed because firstly they're dead and secondly they're not in bed. Hypothetically, if he'd murdered them in their beds, would it be so difficult to simply snap a picture of them still lying dead in their beds? For some reason he can't send images, because to do so might compromise him. The photos could be used against him in a court of law. The area in the house where the kids are lying, the clothing and the blankets can also be tested for body fluids, fibers, etc. And the last thing he wants to do is risk contaminating himself and the house with them, just to honor Shanann's latest errand request. Sorry I bothered you. I just wanted to talk to you. It's actually very out of character for Watts not to do his wife's bidding as ordered. Yet conversely, it's out of character for Shanann not to insist he sends her the damn pictures she asked for. Had Shanann insisted, she could have thwarted his premeditated attempts to murder her simply because she would have known something serious had happened and she couldn't trust him. Quite conceivably, had Shanann felt frightened or insecure about him upon arrival, she could have asked Nicole to come inside with her and be there beside her while she confronted him and the situation. whatever it was. Sorry I bothered you. I just wanted to talk to you. Another possibility is that Shanann consciously or intuitively was concerned about her children. His getting the babysitter on Saturday night was an all-time first. On that occasion she'd put them to bed, and now she wanted to know if they were settled. It was important they were, because the next day was Bella's first day at kindergarten. It was going to be a big deal for Bella and Shanann, so it was important Bella was taken care of. Sorry I bothered you. I just wanted to talk to you. There is some credence to this theory, based on the doll covered in the twister blanket on the couch. Perhaps Shanann's sixth sense was working overtime. If it was, she was right to be concerned, but sadly too late and too far to be of any help to her two lost children. On page 2117 of the Discovery documents, we literally see the scrambling of the timeline. At around the same time, Nicole Kessinger is texting her friend and confidant Charlotte Nelson about Watts' age, sexiness, and his seeming too good to be true. The Discovery documents timeline goes haywire. It jumps chronologically from 1446 to 1556 to 1656 to 1844 and 1847, then slips back to 1706, and Watts' still unexplained 12-minute call to Sandy Rusick at 1707. Between 1706 and 1726, Watts has two Anadarko employees on his mind. One is Cody Roberts. The two exchange 3 messages during this 20-minute span, all referring to Survey 319. The second at 1726 is Nicole Kessinger. He's Googling Dead Sea Scrolls in lieu of an embarrassing boo-boo he'd made earlier in the day. We can't see what he sent to Kessinger, but we can see her response. No, you can't buy the scrolls. Lols, dude, the Dead Sea Scrolls are some of the oldest, most important writing in the world. Strangely, Kessinger's response is so blurry in the Discovery documents it's practically illegible. Also peculiar, a filtered search through the documents for the terms Dead Sea Scrolls produces only one result, when Watts Googles it at 1726. Seen in isolation and also by jumbling the timeline, it's tempting to dismiss the Google search as random and irrelevant. But we can see at the same time Watts is investigating access to the Survey 319 site. He's at least thinking about another Anadarko worker, Kessinger. Kessinger happens to manage gas monitor sensors. Discovery documents page 569. Watts was manipulating Roberts in order to execute his plan of disposal, but was he counting on Kessinger, not necessarily with her knowledge, as a backup to potentially cover for him in case the sensors of his rig blew up? Although Dead Sea Scrolls features just once in the Discovery documents, chicken comes up 12 times and chicken nuggets occurs 3 times. For some reason, Chris Watts is very clear and specific about chicken nuggets. He mentions it on camera to the cops on August 14th, and he almost repeats the same thing during his sermon on the porch on the same day. Let's listen in to that part to refresh our memories. Reporter: I'm going to ask some tough questions about your relationship with your kids. Watts: nods, curls lower lip. Yeah, they make the kids are my life. I mean, those smiles light up my life. And this, last night, during when they usually eat dinner, it was like, I miss them. I miss telling them, looks down, micro express snarl, hey, you got to eat that, or you're not going to get your dessert. And it's still like, you're not going to get your snack afterwards. I miss that. In this brief answer, Watts interrupts himself, stutters, speaks quickly, provides a lot of superfluous information, and most important, none of it makes any sense. In the schema of the question, Watts doesn't really address the question. Does he have a good relationship with his kids? Does he love them? Do they love him? In Rape of Cassandra, we saw real reasons why the answers to all three of these questions may have been either no, not anymore, or maybe not in the last days and hours prior to the murders. It's very significant that when dealing with the question of his relationship with his children and the concept of tough questions, the first thing that comes into Watts's mind is feeding them, or trying to. If his kids had thrown him with chicken nuggets, why would he miss that? Why would he select a humiliating moment as a fond memory, unless he took some subconscious, silent and sadistic satisfaction in getting rid of his tormentors? That was Two-Face Drilling Through Discovery, which was published on January 27th, 2019. At the time it was published, book 5 was the longest book of the series, at 259 pages. The book following would be even longer, at about 340 pages, but there was far more material for the first time in Drilling Through Discovery. If one looks at the cover, you can see the logo of the FBI mooshed against the logo design of Lavelle on the left and Anadarko on the right. And I did that on purpose, just to, in a way, conflate the FBI with these two brands, which I'd sort of covered in some detail in the foregoing narratives, because there was something both impressive about the FBI, just as there's impressive aspects about I guess the revenues of Lavelle and the scale and scope of operations of Anadarko and the political influence of all these institutions. And then the power and the effectiveness of the FBI in getting what they needed to get done. It's interesting when we go through the discovery, seeing to what extent the FBI are sort of used as a tool as part of the law enforcement efforts, but on the other hand, the FBI sort of take charge of what is happening, and one wonders what the mission of the FBI was, and whether it went beyond the murder case and the disappearance. In other words, were the FBI tasked to control the narrative in any way? Were the FBI tasked to look after the national interests, given the national interests? Were the FBI in any way involved in manipulating the case so that it never went to trial? Although these questions weren't explicitly asked in Drilling Through Discovery, they were implicitly pondered about. And this is because the FBI kind of emerged through the discovery as tricksters and manipulators too. You know, when we see Agent Coder and Lee interrogating Watts, which is dealt with in Drilling Through Discovery, we see how they trick and manipulate him, and we don't really have a problem with it because Watts is guilty and he's committed a heinous crime. But there is something dark about the good guys and the sort of honest side of law enforcement, who need to dissemble and deceive in order to get what they want. And we can take the high ground and say, criminals shouldn't lie and shouldn't steal and shouldn't murder. But what about the people that are tasked with catching them? What happens when lies and deceit and trickery cross a certain line? And in this respect, it's probably useful to use the analogy of Batman. Batman's job is to fight corruption, and yet he himself will never kill anybody. And the reason is, as soon as he kills someone, then he's become corrupted, even if it's a righteous murder. So, for example, Batman will never kill the Joker, even though the Joker has committed mass murders and is clearly guilty. And then you also have the scenario where if Batman doesn't kill the Joker, then who's responsible for the next death caused by the Joker? So it starts to become a very murky, muddy sort of area. But it's nevertheless fascinating how the interrogation plays out, and one only really gets to that when we draw into the discovery, when we look at the long almost nonsense of the very first interrogation on Tuesday night, where nothing really is resolved. It's the first time Coda and Watts kind of have a discussion. You only really get a sense of what's really going on there when you convert the audio to a transcript, and no one has done that. No one has done that in detail and analyzed it. And then taking that into the next day's interrogation and seeing how, because as soon as you transcribe the audio, you also notice changes in strategy and changes in questions, and it just becomes a lot more explicit. One of the reviews of the book noted that the last chapter in particular is grueling and grotesque. The last chapter kind of almost finishes off what the chapter on Rape of Cassandra, dealing with the sort of opening at Service 319. So if the opening at Service 319 is handled in Book 4, then the last chapter of Book 5 sort of kind of deals with what happens after that. What happens after Cece's body is put into the first tank. In terms of the description, I've just said that the fifth book does exactly what the title claims. It drills deep through the mountain of discovery documents. The fifth narrative not only makes sense of the 1,960 pages of discovery, it also integrates the video footage for the first time into a seamless narrative. That was quite surprising. It was quite surprising when one took the text and the discovery documents, and then one sort of cross-reference that with the video footage, and as soon as you do that, you flesh out both. The video is complemented by all the details scattered through the discovery, and the discovery is accentuated by the video. And so for the purposes of a narrative, it really helps to put the two together, and one can really get a lot of detail, and it really helps to sketch out a narrative, not only in terms of factual detail, but also in terms of the sort of visual cues and the visual details going on. As a result, missing pieces are found and new insights revealed and contextualized in the most comprehensive assembly of facts and psychological analysis around this puzzling case yet. I found writing Drilling Through Discovery an absolute joy, with having all of this information at one's fingertips. It's also one of the best reviewed books of the series, and I think the series kind of starts taking a turn in from drilling through discovery onwards. It kind of gets more serious, uh, and facts are distilled in a way that begin to reveal these people in a much deeper way. So if the first book sort of started asking questions, then the last books begin answering them in a way that's anchored in information. The main focus of the um, fifth narrative is on the 3-hour FBI interview with Chris Watts on Tuesday night, August 14th, and then the astonishing follow-up interrogation leading to Watts' confession the next day. So, although the other narratives also deal in detail with the August 14th confession, and again, what's astonishing when you transcribe the interrogation, you notice what the milestones are, and you notice how certain questions are repeated and how the answers differ. And it's just really amazing how much is revealed when you start to um, when you transcribe and when you sort of slow it down. Of course, when you've got the audio on YouTube, one can also listen to snippets again and again, and that also exposes little slips and little words that one would otherwise have missed in a sort of a gloss through of the whole interview. In terms of the excerpt read earlier, there was the section about Shanann consciously or intuitively being concerned about her children. She asked Watts to send her photos, and she didn't really push him to send the photos that she was asking. And then I mentioned that his getting the babysitter on Saturday night was an all-time first. That should have worried her as well. This, you know, not just the fact that he was getting the babysitter, but that he was sort of going out to watch a game. And we know that it did worry her because she went and checked. She checked on the receipt, but she was also worried about her daughters, and she called the babysitter to find out whether the children were settled. But what one must bear in mind is the next night, more than likely, the children never went to sleep, and so it was important in that context. How did Watts get them to go to sleep? And so it was important to Shanann to find that out. How did he put them to bed, and how was all of that going? And Shanann was very careful to address what's on this question, and Watts avoided it. Watts didn't send her photos of them in bed, and it's just unfortunate that Shanann didn't follow up and insist on those pictures. She clearly was worried about it, but more than likely she thought there was something more to be concerned about. And ironically, as correct as that was, if she'd only just addressed her initial concern, who knows how things could have turned out. Of the whole interview. The purpose of drilling through discovery is to uncover Watts' thought process leading up to the murders. So, in the same way that we see how Watts deals with being asked questions in terms of the police and his interrogators, we also get a sense of what kind of guy he is as a person, how he deals with difficult questions. And what we see is he is a lot less of a confrontational person than we imagine. We also see that he's a very weak man in terms of dealing with reality and dealing honestly with difficult information. And that speaks very much into this case, where you have a situation where he's caught up in a pregnancy, he's caught up in a unhappy marriage, he's caught up in an affair. And even in terms of the affair, how does he deal with uncomfortable information? Well, he avoids it, and he avoids it till the last possible moment. And obviously when you avoid responsibility, whether it's from dealing with debt or dealing with a person or dealing with a circumstance that's sort of like a downward spiral, it eventually reaches a nexus, it eventually reaches a crisis point. And that's really what true crime is at the end of the day. It is a breaking point, an inflection point in human psychology. It's a point where so much pressure and tension and anxiety is brought to bear that you then have a kind of a break, and it's almost like a bone that's being bent. It flexes slightly to a point, and then eventually, when the pressure is enough, it breaks. And that happens with ordinary human beings. When we have situations in our lives that we don't address and we don't treat in an authentic way, that we either dodge or lie about or cover up or find some way of just sort of pushing aside or postponing, then it piles up. But it doesn't only pile up in terms of tension and anxiety. It kind of piles up psychologically. It creates a psychological burden, and when one eventually deals with it, one could argue that the crime isn't actually dealing with it. It's just another sort of way of kicking that can down the road. I mean, it's an extreme way, but when you've been lying all along about something, then the crime is just a logical extension of that. To us, it's to us law-abiding citizens, people who don't commit crimes, it's a aberration, and it's shocking, and it should be. But to someone who's living a lie, to someone whose whole life is a lie, a crime, even a crime as shocking as murder, even a crime as incomprehensible as triple murder and of one's own children, it begins to feel like almost just a logical end, almost like something that is inevitable. And where people will shake their heads and say that there's no way anyone can explain this to them. It is explicable, and that's the true horror. So the true horror is that not only can this happen, and not only can we understand how it happens, but it's happening all the time. It's happening. Crimes like this are happening all the time in America and in the world. And our shaking of our heads and saying we just don't understand how it happens is part of the problem, because we're not acknowledging that it's part of the human condition to not want to deal with things, and not want to admit things, and not want to hold ourselves in a way equal to the human condition. We want to separate ourselves and say Chris Watts is a monster and is nothing like us, and we are nothing like him, and we would never do anything like him. Well, if you've ever told a lie, you are similar to Chris Watts. If you've ever cheated on your partner, you're similar to Chris Watts. If you've ever tried to cover up something that you've done for an extended period, you're like Chris Watts. If you don't want to pay the piper, in other words, you don't want to pay money for some kind of error or some kind of situation, then you're just like Chris Watts. And I was recently in a situation where I needed to arrange transport from A to B, and I won't go into the details of it here, but I made I wouldn't say I made an error, but I didn't fully get the arrangement to go through, and as a result I ended up having to pay quite a lot of money in a crisis situation to have this sorted out. And I was very angry about it. I was very reluctant to do it, and I was also tempted in the end not to pay the amount. And that exactly that scenario, which is a very common thing. It's you get yourself into a situation possibly of your own making, but then you don't want to take responsibility for it. And maybe you're not totally responsible for it, but the bottom line is taking responsibility is hard. Admitting one has made a mistake is hard, and we as a society kind of have a psychology where we do that, and we need to remove the taboo that making mistakes is wrong, because that's how we learn from them. Also, you become a better practitioner of life and a better liver of life, and a better and a more loving human being when you can make mistakes and be free to make mistakes and learn from your mistakes and become a fuller, richer person. So I've hoped that with my narratives I've humanized Chris Watts in the sense of not that what he's done is forgivable, but that he's not as alien to everyone as we would like to think. He's not some kind of monster or narcissist that's nothing like us. By showing him and showing the family in terms that we can identify with, in terms that we can associate with, we can maybe look into that and say, don't be like Chris Watts, be honest about this. Don't be like Shanann, be less controlling. Don't be like, don't use this, don't allow the situation to perpetuate. Let's deal with it. Let's allow the tension that's there to dissipate. Let's turn this unpleasantness into, let's find our way out of it, but in an authentic way, in a realistic way, and in a way where people can sort of move forward in a functional way and in an honest way. And so that's basically something I wanted to do with all the narratives. But just coming back to drilling through discovery and this particular chapter, the chapter really had to do with three separate what I call Bermuda timeline data triangles, and I've just touched on the one in this particular introduction, but there are two others, and one that's really interesting and very poorly referenced in the discovery documents is the 111-minute Bermuda timeline triangle. And this is the call that occurred late at night on the Sunday on August 12th, and it is a very exciting aspect to write about that, because as soon as one noticed that, one also started to wonder, well, shouldn't the FBI have known a lot more about what was going on here? And it also made Kessinger's involvement quite crucial, because it lay almost at the fulcrum between the three murders. It made her presence kind of more direct. And all I'm saying is that the discovery documents didn't really acknowledge that, whereas the timeline data, the actual information, does show quite a clear, I don't want to say involvement, because I'm not saying Nicole Kessinger was involved in any way. I'm simply saying she was part of Chris Watts' psychology very much during the actual execution of the crimes. We know that. I mean, if someone had to ask that question, we know that. But this long phone call really reveals that, and it's one of the enduring mysteries of this case is what was actually spoken about in in 1 hour 51 minutes on the night of the murders. and that certainly hasn't been addressed by anyone, not Chris Watts and not Kissinger herself. It took a long time to actually find information where the FBI and CBI dealt with that, and in the beginning it appeared that they didn't, and that they didn't know about it, but they eventually did find it, and they did, I thought quite clumsily, they quite clumsily referred to this, and they didn't pressure anyone for straight answers out of it. But that 111 minutes is a very important part of drilling through discovery. Thanks for listening.